They say the Alpha King doesn't thank anyone. He conquers. He punishes. He takes what he wants and leaves the rest to rot. So when I scrubbed his twin pups, blood off the marble floor at 3 in the morning, after they'd torn apart a rogue Volf in the throne room and vanished like ghosts, I didn't expect gratitude. I expected silence, maybe a cold dismissal. What I didn't expect was for him to find me in the shadows of the corridor, exhausted and trembling, my hands still stained red. I didn't expect him to pin me against the stone wall with a grip that made my Volf whimper in submission. And I certainly didn't expect him to lean in close, his breath hot against my throat, his voice a dangerous rasp that shattered every rule I thought I knew. You smell like them now. Before I could breathe, before I could beg him to let me go, his teeth sank into my neck. Not a kill bite, not a command, a mark. And in that moment, I realized the most terrifying truth of all. I had just become the one thing more dangerous than the Alpha King's rage. His obsession. Chapter 1. I learned early that invisibility was survival. In a pack where bloodlines determined your worth and your Volf strength decided your future, I had neither. My parents died when I was 6 rogues, they said, though no one ever proved it. No one cared enough to try. I was shuffled into the pack house as a cleaner, given a cot in the basement and a list of tasks that never ended. By the time I turned 20, I had perfected the art of being no one. I kept my eyes down. I worked through the night. I never spoke unless spoken to, and even then I made my answers short and forgettable. The other Omegas whispered about mates and mating balls, and the possibility of being chosen by a strong Volf. I stopped dreaming about that years ago. Dreams were for wolves who mattered. I was a ghost in the Alpha King's castle, and ghosts didn't get happily ever afters. The castle itself was a fortress of black stone and iron, perched on the edge of the northern reach, where the mountains met the sky. It was said that the Alpha King's ancestors built it with blood magic and ancient oaths, and that every stone remembered the screams of those who challenged the crown. I believed it. The place felt alive in the worst way, cold, watchful, hungry. Most of the staff feared the upper floors, where the king's private chambers were located. They feared the throne room even more. But someone had to clean them, and since I had no family to mourn me if I disappeared, the task always fell to me. I didn't mind. The silence suited me. Tonight, though, the silence was wrong. I arrived at the throne room just after midnight, my arms full of cleaning supplies, and stopped dead in the doorway. The smell hit me first copper and fury, thick enough to choke on. Then I saw the blood. It was everywhere. Splattered across the marble floor in violent arcs. Smeared along the base of the throne. Pooled near the far wall where something or someone had been dragged. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to step inside. This wasn't the first time I'd cleaned up after violence. The Alpha King's court was brutal. Challengers came and went. Traitors were made examples of. But this was different. The claw marks on the floor were small. Too small to belong to an adult Volf. My breath caught as I knelt beside one of the marks, tracing it with trembling fingers. A cold realization settled over me like frost. The twins. Everyone in the castle knew about them, though few had ever seen them up close. The Alpha King's sons born 3 years ago under a blood moon, their mother dead within hours of their birth. Rumor said they were cursed. That they shifted too young, their wolves wild and uncontrollable. That the king kept them locked away in the highest tower because even he couldn't tame them. I'd never believed the stories. Until now. I worked quickly, methodically, scrubbing the blood from the stone until my arms ached and my knees were bruised. I didn't let myself think about what had happened here. I didn't let myself wonder if the twins were safe, or if someone else was dead. It wasn't my place to wonder. By the time I finished, the sky outside the tall windows had shifted from black to deep blue. Dawn was close. I gathered my supplies and stood, my legs stiff and unsteady. That's when I heard the footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, coming from the corridor behind me. I turned slowly, my heart pounding, and saw him. Alpha King Tyrannus Ashfall. He stood in the doorway like a storm-given form, tall, broad-shouldered, his presence so overwhelming that the air itself seemed to bend around him. His eyes were the color of molten gold, burning with an intensity that made my Volf flatten in submission before I could stop her. He was dressed simply black pants, a loose shirt that did nothing to hide the raw power of his frame, but he didn't need ornament. He was the kind of man who commanded fear without trying. I dropped my gaze immediately, my pulse hammering in my throat. "Your Majesty," I whispered, bowing low. He said nothing. The silence stretched, unbearable, until I felt his gaze on me like a physical weight. I kept my head down, kept my breathing shallow, and prayed he would leave. Instead, he stepped closer. "You cleaned this." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes, Your Majesty." Another pause. Then, "Why?" I blinked, confusion flickering through my fear. "It's my duty, Your Majesty. I clean the throne room every night. You clean blood." His voice was low, rough, edged with something I couldn't name. "You don't ask questions. You don't report what you see." I swallowed hard. "I have no one to report to, Your Majesty. And no reason to ask questions that aren't mine to answer." He moved again, circling me slowly, and I felt like prey beneath a predator's gaze. My Wolf whimpered, torn between the instinct to run and the overwhelming need to submit. "What's your name?" The question startled me so much I almost looked up. Almost. "Sira, Your Majesty." "Sira." He repeated it like he was tasting it, testing it. "How long have you worked here?" 14 years, Your Majesty." He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Close enough that his scent pine and smoke and something darker, something wild wrapped around me like a command. "And in 14 years, no one has ever noticed you." It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Good." Then he walked past me, his footsteps echoing in the empty throne room, and disappeared into the shadows of the castle. I stood there for a long time after he was gone, my hands shaking, my heart still racing. I didn't understand what had just happened, but I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that my invisibility had just shattered, and the Alpha King had seen me. Chapter 2. I didn't sleep. I went back to my room in the basement, peeled off my blood-stained clothes, and sat on the edge of my cot staring at the wall. My mind kept circling back to the throne room, to the twins' claw marks, to the king's voice. "Why? What's your name?" "No one has ever noticed you." I'd spent 14 years perfecting the art of being forgotten. In less than 5 minutes, he'd unraveled it all. Why had he been there? Why had he cared that I'd cleaned up the mess? And why had he looked at me like I was something more than invisible? I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to stop the spiral of thoughts. It didn't matter. Whatever curiosity he'd felt would fade. He was the Alpha King. I was a nameless Omega. Our worlds didn't touch. Except they had, and I had a sinking feeling they would again. The next night, I returned to my duties with grim determination. I avoided the throne room, focusing instead on the lesser halls and chambers. I scrubbed floors, polished silver, and kept my head down. But I felt it, the weight of eyes on me. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Paranoia born from exhaustion. But then I caught the glances other Omegas watching me with something between curiosity and wariness. The head housekeeper, Marta, pulled me aside in the kitchens and asked if I'd done something to offend someone important. "No," I said quickly. "Why?" She frowned, her weathered face creased with concern. "Because people are talking. Saying the king himself spoke to you last night." My stomach dropped. It was nothing. I was cleaning the throne room, and he asked my name. "That's all." "That's all?" Marta's eyes widened. "Sira, the king doesn't ask names. He doesn't speak to staff unless they've done something worth punishing. I didn't do anything wrong," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "Then why did he notice you?" I had no answer. Marta sighed and squeezed my shoulder. "Be careful, girl. Attention from men like him doesn't end well for women like us." Her words haunted me as I worked through the night. It was nearly 3 in the morning when I heard the crash. I was in the West Wing, dusting the ancestral portraits, when the sound echoed through the corridor, sharp, violent, followed by a child's scream. I froze. Then I ran. I didn't think. I didn't stop to consider that I had no business interfering. I just followed the sound, my heart pounding, until I reached the base of the spiral staircase that led to the tower. The twins' tower. Another scream. High-pitched, terrified. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my breath ragged, and burst through the door at the top. The room was chaos. Furniture overturned, curtains shredded, and in the center of it all, two small wolves, silver-furred and wild-eyed, snarling at a figure backed into the corner. A woman, young, elegantly dressed, her face pale with fear. One of the twins lunged, and she screamed again. "Stop!" I shouted. The wolves turned toward me, their lips pulled back in feral growls. They were beautiful and terrifying, too young to have this much rage, too small to carry this much power. I raised my hand slowly, keeping my voice soft. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The larger of the two, a male, I thought took a step toward me. His golden eyes narrowed. I didn't move, didn't run. I just knelt down, making myself smaller, and kept talking. "I know you're scared. I know you're angry. But she's not your enemy." I glanced at the woman. "Go! Now." She didn't need to be told twice. She scrambled to her feet and fled. The twins watched her go, then turned back to me. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then the smaller one, a female, whimpered. My heart clenched. Slowly, carefully, I extended my hand. The male growled, but the female stepped closer. She sniffed my fingers, her nose twitching, and then so gently it broke something inside me. She licked my palm. "There," I whispered. "See? I'm safe." The male hesitated, then padded forward. He butted his head against my knee, his growl fading into a low rumble. I let out a shaky breath and ran my fingers through their fur, soothing them until their bodies relaxed and their eyes began to droop. "You're just babies," I murmured. "You're just scared and alone, aren't you?" They curled up against me, their small bodies warm and trembling, and for the first time in years, I felt something other than emptiness. I felt needed. I stayed with them until they fell asleep, then carefully extracted myself and stood. I needed to leave before someone found me here. Before. "You have a gift." I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. The Alpha King stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Your Majesty," I breathed, bowing quickly. "I heard them crying and you calmed them." He stepped into the room, his gaze moving from me to the sleeping twins and back again. "No one has ever calmed them." I didn't know what to say. He moved closer, his presence filling the space, and I forced myself not to retreat. "Who was the woman?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I don't know. She ran before I could ask." His jaw tightened. "She was sent to assess them, to see if they were manageable." Understanding dawned, cold and sickening. "You're looking for someone to care for them. I'm looking for someone they won't kill." The bluntness of it stole my breath. He looked at me again, his golden eyes sharp and calculating. "They trust you. I don't. You'll move into the tower. Starting tonight." "What?" Panic flared. "Your Majesty, I'm just a cleaner. I can't." "You just did." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a growl that made my Volf shiver. "They need someone who isn't afraid of them. Someone who doesn't see them as monsters. But I'm no one." I whispered. "You're the only one they didn't try to tear apart." He straightened, his decision clearly final. "Your things will be moved within the hour. You'll stay with them. Keep them calm. Keep them safe. And if I refuse?" His smile was cold. "You won't." He turned and walked toward the door, then paused. "One more thing, Sierra." The sound of my name on his lips sent a shiver down my spine. "Don't make me regret this." Then he was gone, and I was left standing in a room full of sleeping Volf pups, and the terrifying realization that my life had just been rewritten. By the Alpha King's command. Chapter 3: The Tower Became My World. Within hours, my few belongings were brought up and placed in a small room adjoining the twins' chambers. It was more space than I'd ever had, a real bed, a window overlooking the mountains, even a private bathroom. It should have felt like a gift. Instead, it felt like a cage. The twins woke at sunset, their eyes wary until they saw me. Then the female Luna. I learned her name from the nursemaid who delivered their meals, bounded over and nuzzled my leg. The male Kale was more cautious, but he didn't growl. Progress. I spent the first few days learning their rhythms. They were wild, yes, but not cruel. They shifted between Volf and human form without warning, their control non-existent. In human form, they looked like any other 3-year-olds, round-cheeked, curious, beautiful. But their eyes held something ancient, something broken. They didn't speak, not in either form. The nursemaid, a stern woman named Greta, told me they'd never spoken a word. The kings had healers, seers, even witches try to fix them. She said, nothing works. They're cursed. I didn't believe in curses. I believed in trauma. These children had lost their mother at birth. They'd been locked away, feared, called monsters. No wonder they couldn't find their voices. So I talked to them. I told them stories as I brushed their hair. I sang soft songs while they ate. I described the world outside the tower, even though I barely knew it myself. And slowly, something shifted. Kale stopped flinching when I reached for him. Luna started bringing me her toys. They began to sleep through the night instead of waking with screams. It wasn't magic. It was just love. But apparently that was rare enough to be remarkable. The Alpha King came to check on them every 3 days, always at night, always unannounced. He never stayed long. He'd stand in the doorway, his gaze moving over his sons with an expression I couldn't read, and then he'd leave. He never spoke to me. Until the night everything changed. I was sitting on the floor with Luna, helping her build a tower out of wooden blocks, when I felt the familiar weight of his presence. I glanced up and found him watching from the threshold, his eyes fixed on his daughter. Luna noticed him and froze. Then, to my shock, she scrambled to her feet and ran toward him. The king went rigid, and for a heartbeat, I thought he'd push her away. Instead, he knelt. Luna crashed into his chest, her small arms wrapping around his neck, and he caught her. His large hands cradled her tiny body with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a man of his size and reputation. My throat tightened. Kale, emboldened by his sister, toddled over and grabbed his father's sleeve. The king looked at them both, something raw and wounded flickering across his face, and then his gaze lifted to mine. You did this. It wasn't a question. They're good children, I said quietly. They just needed to feel safe. He stood, lifting Luna with him, and walked toward me. Kale followed, clinging to his leg. They've never approached me before, he said, his voice rough. They've always been afraid. Maybe they were waiting for you to show them you weren't afraid of them. His eyes narrowed. You think I fear my own sons? I think you fear what they represent. The words slipped out before I could stop them, and I braced for his anger. But he didn't rage. He just stared at me, his jaw tight, and then set Luna down. Put them to bed. I did, moving quickly, my heart pounding. The twins protested, reaching for their father, but he'd already turned away. When they were finally asleep, I found him standing by the window, his back to me. You overstep, he said without turning. I apologize, Your Majesty. Do you? I hesitated. No. He turned then, his expression unreadable. Why not? Because someone needs to say it. I met his gaze, even though everything in me screamed to look away. You're not just their king. You're their father. And they need you. They need stability. Safety. I provide that. They need you to love them. The words hung in the air, sharp and dangerous. His eyes flashed gold, his Volf rising to the surface. You know nothing about what they need. I know they light up when you walk into the room. I know they reach for you even though you never reach back. I know they're desperate for you to see them as more than a curse. Enough. His voice was a growl, vibrating with barely leashed power. But I couldn't stop. They lost their mother. Don't make them lose you too. He closed the distance between us in 2 strides, his hand wrapping around my throat, not squeezing, just holding, a reminder of how easily he could break me. You forget yourself, Omega. Then punish me, I whispered. But don't punish them for my honesty. For a long, terrible moment, he just stared at me, his grip firm, his breathing ragged. Then he released me and stepped back. You're right. The admission shocked me more than anything else could have. He turned away, his shoulders rigid. I don't know how to be what they need. Their mother. She died because of me. Because I couldn't protect her. And every time I look at them, I see her. I see my failure. My anger drained away, replaced by something softer. They're not her. They're themselves. And they're here. Alive. Wanting you. He didn't respond. I took a breath and dared to step closer. Start small. Sit with them at breakfast. Read them a story. Let them see that you're not untouchable. He looked at me over his shoulder, his eyes searching mine. And if I fail? Then you try again. Something in his expression cracked. Just for a moment, and I saw the man beneath the crown. Lonely. Lost. Afraid. Then he straightened, his mask sliding back into place. I'll consider it. He moved toward the door, then paused. You're dismissed for the night. Your Majesty, that wasn't a suggestion. He left, and I stood there in the silence, my pulse still racing, my thoughts a tangled mess. I just challenged the Alpha King, and somehow I was still alive. Chapter 4. Things changed after that night. Subtly at first. The king began appearing more often, not just to observe, but to interact. He brought the twins books and read to them in a low, halting voice. He let them climb on him during their play. He even smiled once when Kale shifted mid-laugh and accidentally knocked over a chair. It was progress and it was dangerous. Because the more time he spent in the tower, the more time he spent looking at me. Not with suspicion or disdain, with something else. Something that made my skin flesh and my vulva stir restlessly. I tried to ignore it. Tried to convince myself I was imagining the way his gaze lingered when he thought I wasn't looking. The way his voice softened when he spoke my name. The way he found excuses to stand close to me. His presence overwhelming and intoxicating. But I wasn't imagining it. And neither was anyone else. The castle had started to talk. Whispers followed me through the corridors now. The Omegas stared. The guards watched. Even Greta gave me suspicious looks when she delivered meals. People are saying the king's taken an interest in you, she said one afternoon, her tone sharp. That's ridiculous, I replied, keeping my eyes on the twins. Is it? He's never spent this much time in the tower. Never bothered with his sons before. And now suddenly he's here every night, watching you like what? I snapped. She pressed her lips together. Like a wolf watches prey. The comparison sent a chill down my spine. That night, I was putting the twins to bed when I heard raised voices outside the tower door. I froze, straining to listen. Not appropriate, Your Majesty. She's an Omega. A cleaner. The king's voice, cold and lethal. Are you questioning my judgment, counselor? I'm questioning your sense. The court is already restless. If they think you formed an attachment to a nobody, it will weaken your position. Especially now, with the Southern Pacts pushing for alliance. The Southern Pacts can rot. They're offering their Alpha's daughter. A strategic marriage that would secure the border, and I don't need a strategic marriage. Then what do you need? The counselor's voice rose, frustration bleeding through. Because from where I stand, you're risking everything for a woman who means nothing. Silence. Then the king's voice, soft and deadly. Get out! Footsteps retreated rapidly. I stood there, my heart hammering, trying to process what I'd just heard. A marriage offer. A woman who means nothing. The door opened, and the king stepped inside, his expression thunderous. I quickly looked away, pretending I hadn't been listening. They're asleep? He asked, his tone clipped. Yes, Your Majesty. He moved to stand by their beds, his hands clenched at his sides. I'm going to war. The words hit me like a blow. What? The Southern Pacts have been raiding our border villages, killing our wolves. It ends now. He looked at me, his eyes hard. I leave at dawn. I'll be gone for at least 2 weeks. But the twins will be safe with you. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. You'll stay in the tower. No one is to disturb you. Greta will bring supplies. If anything happens, anything, you send word immediately. Your Majesty, I don't understand. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to know. He reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek so lightly I thought I'd imagined it. And because I need to know they'll be protected. They will be. I promised. I won't let anything happen to them. His jaw tightened. See that you don't. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Sierra. Yes. Don't listen to the counselors. Don't listen to the court. His gaze burned into mine. You're not nothing. Before I could respond, he was gone. I stood there trembling, his words echoing in my mind. You're not nothing. The next morning, I watched from the tower window as the king led his forces out of the castle, a sea of wolves and warriors disappearing into the mountains. And for the first time in my life, I felt something I'd never allowed myself to feel before. Hope. But hope, I would soon learn, was a dangerous thing. Because 3 days after the king left, a woman arrived at the tower door. She was beautiful, devastatingly so, with hair like spun gold and eyes like ice. She wore the colors of the Southern Pax, and she smiled at me like a predator smiles at wounded prey. You must be the little Omega everyone's talking about, she said, her voice sweet and poisonous. I'm Lady Alara, the king's future bride. My blood turned to ice. I wanted to meet the woman who's been keeping his sons entertained. She stepped past me, uninvited, her gaze sweeping the room. How quaint. You've done a lovely job. But you won't be needed much longer. I don't understand, I managed. She turned, her smile widening. Once the king and I are wed, I'll be taking over the twins' care. A proper mother, from a proper bloodline. Not some orphan nobody playing pretend. Each word was a knife. The king hasn't agreed to marry you, I said, my voice shaking. Oh, sweetheart. She laughed, the sound cruel. He doesn't have a choice. The treaty's already been drawn up. The council's approved it. And when he comes back from war, he'll do what's necessary for the kingdom. She leaned in close, her breath hot against my ear. And you? You'll go back to scrubbing floors. Where you belong. Then she swept out, leaving me standing in the wreckage of everything I'd started to believe. The king was getting married, and I was nothing but a temporary distraction. Chapter 5, I didn't cry. I wouldn't give her or anyone the satisfaction. Instead, I threw myself into caring for the twins with desperate intensity. I played with them until they were exhausted. I sang until my voice was hoarse. I held them when they cried and celebrated every small victory. But at night, when they were asleep and the tower was silent, the truth clawed at me. I'd been foolish. The king had never promised me anything. He'd never said I was more than a caretaker. I'd let myself imagine meaning in his words and his looks, in the way he said my name. But he was a king, and I was no one. The days crawled by. The twins sensed my distress and grew restless. Kale started waking with nightmares again. Luna refused to eat. I was failing them. And I hated myself for it. On the 10th day, Greta arrived with news. The king's forces won a decisive victory, she said, her expression carefully neutral. He'll be back tomorrow. And the wedding's been scheduled for the end of the month. My stomach dropped. That's soon. The council wants it done quickly. Solidify the alliance before the Southern Pax change their minds. I nodded numbly. Greta hesitated, then added quietly, I'm sorry, Sierra. I know you. I know this isn't easy. I forced a smile. I'm just the help. It doesn't matter what I feel. But it did. It mattered so much I could barely breathe. The next evening, the king returned. I heard the commotion in the courtyard, cheers, celebration, the sound of victory. I stayed in the tower, keeping the twins occupied, and tried not to think about him. But of course he came. He always came. The door opened, and there he was, covered in road dust, his armor dented, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. And the moment he saw the twins, everything else fell away. They shrieked with joy and ran to him, their small bodies colliding with his legs. He knelt and pulled them into his arms, his expression raw with relief. I missed you, he murmured, his voice breaking. Kale buried his face in his father's shoulder. Luna pressed her forehead against his, her little hands framing his face. And for the first time since I'd known him, the Alpha King will toll. I turned away, giving them privacy, and moved toward the window. Sierra. I froze. Look at me. I turned slowly, my heart aching. He stood, still holding the twins, his gaze locked on mine. You kept them safe. Of course. You kept them happy. I didn't respond. He set the twins down gently and walked toward me, his eyes searching my face. What's wrong? Nothing, Your Majesty. Don't lie to me. I looked away. Congratulations on your victory, and your... Upcoming marriage. His expression darkened. Who told you? Lady Alara paid me a visit. She wanted to make sure I understood my place. And what place is that? His voice was dangerously soft. Temporary, replaceable, forgotten. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. Is that what you think? It's what I know. You're wrong. I laughed bitterly. Am I? You're marrying her. Taking a proper queen. Giving your sons a proper mother. And my voice cracked. I go back to being invisible. No. He grabbed my wrist, pulling me toward him. You don't. Your Majesty. She's not my mate. The words were a growl. She's a political arrangement, a necessity. Nothing more. Then why agree to it? Because I had no choice. He released me, running a hand through his hair in frustration. The council's right. The kingdom needs this alliance. And I need to do what's best for my people. Even if it means... He stopped, his jaw clenched. Even if it means what? I whispered. He looked at me, and the pain in his eyes was unbearable. Even if it means giving up what I want. The air between us charged with unspoken truths. What do you want? I asked, my voice barely audible. He closed the distance between us in one stride, his hand cupping my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. You. The world tilted. You, he repeated, his voice rough with need. From the moment I saw you in that throne room, covered in blood and unafraid. From the moment you challenged me. From the moment my sons looked at you like you were the only safe thing in their world. You can't, I breathed. I'm everything. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. You're everything I didn't know I needed. And I can't have you. Tears burned my eyes. Then why tell me? Because you deserve to know. His hand slid to the back of my neck, his grip firm and possessive. You deserve to know that you're not nothing. You never were. This doesn't change anything, I whispered. I know. You're still marrying her. I know. And I'm still no one. You're wrong, his blazed. You're the woman who saved my sons. The woman who made me want to be a better man. The woman I'd burn this entire kingdom down for if I could. But you won't. No. His voice broke. I won't. And then, with a desperation that shattered us both, he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was hunger and grief and fury and need, all tangled together in a kiss that felt like drowning and flying at the same time. I kissed him back with everything I had, all the hope I tried to bury, all the love I'd been too afraid to name. When we finally broke apart, we were both shaking. I'm sorry, he whispered against my lips. I'm so sorry. I pressed my hand against his chest, feeling his heart race beneath my palm. Don't marry her, please. I have to. And let me go. Send me away. I can't, a sob escaped. I can't watch you belong to someone else. His arms tightened around me. I'll never belong to her. Only you. That's not enough. I know. He buried his face in my hair, his voice raw. But it's all I have. We stood there holding each other, knowing it was the beginning and the end all at once. And when he finally pulled away, his eyes wet with unshed tears, he said the words that destroyed me. I'll always choose you. In every world but this one. Then he left. And I collapsed. Chapter 6. The wedding preparations consumed the castle. I stayed in the tower, hidden away with the twins, and tried to pretend the world below didn't exist. But I couldn't escape it. Every night I heard the music, the laughter, the celebration. Every day, Greta brought news I didn't want. The dress was finished. The vows were written. The guests were arriving. Lady Alara visited twice more, each time more smug than the last. He's mine now, she purred during her final visit. And soon, these little beasts will be too. The twins growled at her, their wolves rising instinctively, and I had to physically hold them back. After she left, Luna looked up at me with wide, devastated eyes. Mama? She whispered. It was the first word she'd ever spoken. I broke. I pulled both twins into my arms and sobbed, my heart shattering into pieces too small to ever put back together. I love you, I told them fiercely. No matter what happens, I love you. Always. Kale pressed his face against my shoulder, and Luna clung to my neck, and we stayed like that until the sun set and the stars came out. The wedding was set for dawn. I planned to leave before then. I couldn't watch him marry her. Couldn't stand in the shadows while he vowed himself to someone else. I packed my few belongings in the dead of night, kissed the sleeping twins one last time, and slipped out of the tower. I made it halfway across the courtyard before I heard his voice. Running? I spun around, my heart stopping. The king stood in the moonlight, still dressed in his formal attire from the pre-wedding banquet, his expression unreadable. I can't stay, I said, my voice breaking. Please don't make me stay. He walked toward me slowly, each step deliberate. Where will you go? Anywhere. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. You made your choice. No. He stopped in front of me, his jaw tight. They made my choice. The council, the treaty, the kingdom. But not me. It's the same thing. It's not. He reached for me, his hands framing my face. Sierra, listen to me. I can't marry her. Hope flared, painful and desperate. What? I went to the council tonight. Told them the wedding's off. They'll never allow it. They don't have a choice. His eyes burned into mine. I invoke the Alpha's right, an ancient law that says the king's mate supersedes all political alliances. My breath caught. But you don't have a mate. I do. His thumb brushed away my tears. I've had one since the night I saw you standing in that throne room. Fearless and covered in my son's mess. I just didn't understand it until you made me feel again. I'm not. You are. He dropped to his knees in front of me, his hands gripping mine. You're my mate, Sierra. The bond's been there all along. I was just too broken to see it. I stared at him, unable to breathe. The night I bit you, he continued, his voice rough. I didn't do it to punish you. I did it because my Volf recognized you. Claimed you. Before my mind could catch up, I touched my neck where his mark still tingled beneath my skin. I should have told you sooner, he said. Should have fought for you from the start. But I was afraid of what it meant. Afraid I'd destroy you the way I destroyed their mother. You didn't destroy her, I whispered. I couldn't save her. You can't save everyone. I knelt in front of him, our faces level. But you can choose who you love. And who loves you back. His eyes searched mine. Do you love me? I laughed through my tears. Yes. God help me. Yes. He pulled me against him, his arms crushing me to his chest, and I felt the bond snap into place solid, unbreakable, eternal. Then marry me, he said against my hair. Not for politics, not for duty, but because we're meant to be. The council can accept it or leave. He pulled back, his gaze fierce. I've spent 3 years ruling for everyone else. It's time I ruled for myself. For my sons. For you. What about Lady Alara? Already sent home with a very generous apology and a new trade agreement that doesn't require my soul. I laughed, the sound wet and joyful. He stood, pulling me with him, and kissed me with a certainty that made the stars seem dim. When we broke apart, he pressed his forehead to mine. I love you, Sierra, my mate. My queen. My everything. I love you too, I whispered. And as the first light of dawn touched the sky, the Alpha King carried me back to the tower, not as a cleaner, not as a caretaker, but as the woman who would stand beside him. Forever. The twins woke to find us together, and their joy was absolute. They shifted and pounced and laughed, their voices finally free. Papa, Kale shouted. Mama, Luna echoed. And in that moment, surrounded by the family I never thought I'd have, I understood the truth. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was seen, chosen, loved, and I was home.